Welcome, and thanks for joining us for another episode of Code Girls on Air, a podcast exploring all things technology, female leadership, careers, education, and topics within the nonprofit sector. On this episode, we will be interviewing Liz Marchi, who leads Two Bear Capital's community engagement and partnerships. She is a pioneer in building access to equity capital and high-value startups in non-traditional locations. She founded and led Montana-based Frontier Angels for 12 years, seeding more than $20 million in very early-stage capital. So join Liz and me to hear more about her story. Hi, Liz. So good to have you. Thank you for joining us from Bozeman today. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. Thank you, Makayla, for inviting me to be on. I'm very excited to talk with you.
Of course. Thank you. It's been a minute since I've seen you. I believe I saw you back when the program first started. You were a judge for our minnow tank, right?
Absolutely, when you were in the fifth grade.
Yeah, way back then. So it's been a minute, so I'm glad to talk with you and meet with you again. Do you think you could tell us a little bit about your background and maybe explain exactly what a VC or venture capitalist is?
So, I have been working almost 50 years, and I have what I would call a very diverse journey to venture capital. But what venture capital is and does, it is private money that is managed by a team and invested in new innovations and generally startups at our stage. We're what are called early stage venture capitalists,
Oh, okay.
but you are betting on the future as opposed to bankers, which bet on the past. Bankers like cash flow and collateral. We make determinations about what's possible. And on a bigger level, our firm really is about solving big problems. So that's what I do now. Prior to that, I was a very active angel investor, which is a little bit different. When you're a venture capitalist, you generally have enough money and own enough of a company to have some influence. When you're an angel investor, you generally have a small amount of your personal capital invested as opposed to venture firms, which have institutional and larger dollar amounts. I did angel investing for about 20 years. And prior to that, I had had a sort of interesting career in public policy and finance.
Interesting. Thank you. Could you tell us a little bit why you started Frontier Angel Investors?
Yes, I will. One of the mandates when I started working at Montana West Economic Development, one of our KPIs was to increase wages in the Flathead Valley, which were actually very near the bottom of the entire United States. And one of the things that I knew from my previous careers in other places was that equity or venture-backed companies paid twice the wages of traditionally banked finance
Wow.
companies. And so that seemed like a no-brainer that we needed to have more equity capital. And then the secondary thing to that was I kept meeting amazing, smart people who had grown up in Montana and left because they wanted to work in tech or newer industries, and they went places where equity capital was available. And I had a strong suspicion that there was a lot of money in Montana. It just, nobody had organized it for that purpose.
Oh, yeah. So when you started that, were you able to really see the shift in that equity over the time you were with them?
Over 20 years, we've certainly seen a huge shift.
Good.
We closed Frontier Angel Fund in 2006. So
Okay.
here we are 17 years later. I've done two funds and then I passed off Frontier Angels to someone else and they're on Fund 5. But from the time I moved to Montana in 2000, there was zero equity capital here. And last year, all totaled, we had about $2 billion invested in the state in equity. And a good 500 million of that is actually domiciled in Montana, meaning that it was invested by firms that are actually based here, which is an enormously gratifying change for me
Oh,
personally.
no, absolutely. That's amazing. What would you say was one of the major challenges you faced while you were doing this?
Well, there were tons of challenges. One was it, there was a lot of groundwork education that had
Hmm.
to happen about what is angel investing? Why would I
Right.
want to do it? And the traditional financial community in Montana is very bank focused, very collateral based, and they didn't quite get how complementary our work would be. They kept looking at it as being competitive, but at the same time, I don't think they really thought I was going to be able to do
Right.
it. So that was sort of like, I found a group of really amazing people, most of whom were self-made multimillionaires
Wow.
who really understood that teaching people to fish is a really smart thing to do, and you need ponds for them to do that in that aren't banks.
Right.
So that part of just that understanding about why it was important, because sort of the knee-jerk feeling is, oh, you just want to get a lot of rich people together. No, we want to get people who can afford to invest in high-risk ventures, because in the angel world, you lose about half your money
Mm.
generally. And you just do, because
Right.
startups are risky. And
Yeah.
so we needed to find people who had that sort of risk profile,
Mm.
and not everybody does.
No. No. Well, and especially that being such a new idea in Montana, we're so
Yes.
rural here, so I'd assume that's even more challenging to
Well,
find.
and it's not just in Montana. I mean, the angel community is not the organized angel community. We grew up with it. I mean, that was one of the cool things, is that Kauffman Foundation out of Kansas City actually came out to Montana in 2004 when I was having an education session and
Oh,
said,
okay.
wow, if there are 80 people interested in learning how to be good angel investors, then maybe this is a national thing. And while there had been angels, they had mostly been country club groups of men
Yeah.
having lunch, having a few local companies pitch, and there was no structure or what I would call structure or conform uniformity around
Yeah.
that.
Yes.
So one of the most rewarding parts of the work I've done over the years is collaborating with other communities and other groups to standardize documents and term sheets, and even put together a dictionary, because the whole language of investing is
Yeah.
different, and it can be very intimidating if you've never
Yeah.
been at that table.
Hmm. Yeah. And like you just said, it's working with men where the VC world isn't that mainly dominated by men. Um,
Hmm.
so what were some of the unique challenges maybe you had as a woman in this field?
Oh, I tried. I could have never done this in Alabama. Nobody, I mean, I grew up in the deep South. I don't think anybody would have taken me seriously.
Mm.
But I have this theory about working with people who are aligned with your interest. And I was really happy to do the work. And I didn't really have the resume that some of my investors did, having started big
Right.
businesses or started businesses that grew large.
Hmm.
And so I did all the grunt work, and they were kind of the front people. But, I got to be in the room and sit
Yeah.
at the table, and I learned a lot along the way, and built my confidence. And I'm sure that I wouldn't be where I was today had I not taken that risk and that opportunity. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think it's great you said about aligning yourself with people with the same goals. I mean, that's essentially code girls, getting all
Yeah.
these girls together to work
Yeah.
together to get into that field more.
You meet girls that you talk to about co-girls, and they go, "Oh, I don't want to do that, but I know two other people who might." So,
Right. Exactly.
for me, the thing is never give up.
No, definitely. Well, and it can be intimidating to go into a technology field, especially here in Montana. There's still few people in the tech industry in general, so it can be really intimidating for young kids to want to go into that without seeing that around. Um,
I own the URL. You can't be what you can't see. And if you've never seen, somebody that looks like you, thinks like you, or, acts like you, do something you want to do, it's very hard.
yeah.
Yeah, pattern
Well,
matches and stereotypes are very, very real.
yeah. Yeah. What would you say is just your favorite thing about what you do as a whole?
My favorite thing in the world is seeing an entrepreneur step out of their comfort zone, have a great idea, never give up, and succeed. I mean, it's all about them. It's all about new ideas, new people. It's so not, and something I love most about my venture firm, if our entrepreneurs, our companies don't succeed, it's on us, not on them. But that's what makes me, and I've had the opportunity to see over the years. I've taught some at the University of Montana in the equity finance class, and to see my student, grow and succeed in the world that they wanted. That was, it's scary
Yeah,
to put yourself out there and to do something new and different. Yeah, that's the best feeling of all.
nice. What would you say is one piece of advice you'd give to somebody starting out um, in your field? What's something you'd
So
say to
if you want to be in venture capital, the world is highly technical, and
them?
and almost every new innovation that's going to happen will have some very significant technical component. So you almost have to be a polymath. You have to most people are a mile wide, an inch deep, or either they're 100 feet deep and an inch wide. You need to know a lot about a lot of things, but also about how the unexpected apples and oranges make a new fruit. So you have to be infinitely curious. You have to be very observant. You have to genuinely enjoy people. You have to love problem solving because basically that is all venture capital is just solving problems on, many levels, people, markets, and you also have to have an absolute tolerance for risk because
Hmm.
while there are many things that you can impact, markets, changes, competition, regulatory issues, there are a
Right.
lot of things that really are out of your control. And it's not the fact that you can control them, that it's the ability to stand back and relax. I mean, and look at it and say, okay, we got to pivot here.
Yeah. And be able to switch between all those different.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. I was just talking with Melissa, who's our fund development director here at Co-Girls, and we were talking about all these people that we meet working for a nonprofit and meeting all these people with startups and who wear all these different hats and just can do so many different things, and their resumes are just incredible. I mean, they have their fingers in so many different. It's just incredible how many different fields you need to work in to be able to make it as an entrepreneur. Um,
Absolutely. Yeah, it's hard. It's really hard. And one of the things in particular, Makayla, I think for women, you cannot go far without a team.
right.
And building a team is a really challenging endeavor. And I look at my funds, my frontier funds, as a team. And I wasn't the coach, but I was sort of the mediator that reminded everybody why we're here, what we're trying to do, because egos get in the way a lot. And we are, while we have a lot of sports analogies, it's not the
Mhm.
same when it's an intellectual
Well,
pursuit. It's a
yeah.
different thing. You have
Yeah.
to be mentally and emotionally strong. And EQ to me, emotional intelligence, is the most incredible thing. Combine that with logic, and that
Mm.
makes you a great venture capitalist.
Interesting. Yeah. Oh, and you talked about building a team to make it as a woman entering this workforce. So, when you were building the team, what were some of your most helpful resources that you had to get you along the way when
Um,
building that team?
I had really fabulous mentors.
Mm.
I had a successful venture capitalist who was not the typical Silicon Valley, other people's money. We call that the opium. It was
Mm.
someone who had made a lot of money, who said, you can do this, and who encouraged me and said, you got it, you can do it. And it, you have to have a long view. You can't get discouraged by a day. You
Right.
just, and no for me doesn't mean no, never. It just means not this, not right now,
Mm.
but, not. not forever, and it's not a bad idea. None of that. It's
Right.
just you have to be able to tell your story and what your success looks like for you and what's that end game. And I was real clear on that. And I spent one of the things we don't do is spend enough time up front really
Mm,
thinking through, what's the horizon? Where am I going?
right.
How am I going to get there? What does it look like when I succeed? What's it going to take? Yeah. And there were people who wanted to invest that we didn't said, yeah, no,
Yeah.
because they weren't aligned with our values.
Yeah. Well, and do you have very much of startups coming to you, you saying maybe no or not right now? Does it happen very often where they'll leave and then come back with maybe a
Yes,
new game plan?
yes, that has happened. And almost every business as an angel startup has a significant pivot along the way. They find that their idea, partially because we don't have a what I would call a very dense ecosystem like you do in California,
Oh,
where
sorry.
down the street there might be five businesses like you, but here you first have
Mm,
to figure out who's doing what. Is this a real problem? Do people care?
right.
Because a lot of times entrepreneurs take off because they want to solve a problem they have, but it may not be a
Right.
really significant problem for
Yeah.
everybody. So that's kind of the first thing. But
Yeah.
if you've got that entrepreneurial desire and the passion for that, that happens a lot of times. They come back. And one of our core values in our angel funds were we knew we were going to say no most of the
Mm,
time. But we always did it with some value add of try this, go meet this person, think about this, go talk to,
yeah.
so it
Still
wasn't
helping
just,
them, but not
no, you
just.
suck, it was always like, we love entrepreneurs, love your energy, but why don't you consider this or go meet with this
Yeah.
person or blah, blah, blah. Yeah,
Well, that's what when the code girls work on their community problem ideas, sometimes they'll get going on this little idea that I've never even heard of, and I'm like, well,
right, right.
let's think about it. So we have girls do a survey and they go talk to
Yeah,
their friends and family. So it's very cool that that's still something that happens in
yeah,
the real world
that's
that
just
we're able
like
to.
finding your market fit.
Yeah,
Exactly.
exactly. So talking about, you kind of touched on this, finding the right problem. What would be your top strategy for success after finding your little niche field in your target market?
You need to really know what you're willing to do. In the
Mm,
venture world that I work in now, we're looking at building billion-dollar companies, not because it's $1 billion, but because it's a really hard problem that we want to solve, like curing cancer or curing Alzheimer's or, understanding
yeah,
Alzheimer's and being able to code the human body so we can make precision drugs. Those are big, heavy lifts, and those have big, heavy rewards. But know if you want to, if you are in love with lemonade, just know that the lemonade market is only so big.
hmm
There are thousands of competitors, and your chances of being the market leader are very small because
yeah,
it's going to take a long time and you're never going to own all the market. So just in your mind, again, at the beginning, make that assessment of the risk reward. Um, yeah,
Mm.
yeah.
What advice would you give to gain those entrepreneurship and leadership skills? I mean, you could say think about it, but I know, when you're starting out, like you can think about it, but you don't really know what's the best. What advice would you give to somebody who doesn't know anything about it? They know what they need to do, but they just don't know how.
So go find someone who has done it before
Mm,
or has a lot of knowledge in the space that you want to work in, for example. I mean, they don't even have to be an entrepreneur. Let's say you want to be, you have a idea for a new Band-Aid. You need to go talk to somebody who uses them every day, or and then go talk to somebody who's tried to manufacture something. Never be afraid. I love this book, The Four Agreements. It's my favorite book that I've ever read about life and business. And it's was written in the 1500s. So it's
Wow.
four things that you agree to about life. One is be impeccable with your word. Always do your best, even though your best is not the same every day. Don't take things personally, because don't.
Mm.
The minute you can stop doing that, your whole world will change. And four, don't make assumptions. Go into every meeting or interaction with a new person you don't know without making assumptions that they're smarter or they're dumber or they don't know or they do know or that they're going to be mean to you or tell you no. If you just go in really open with, hi, I'm Liz. I'm really passionate about Band-Aids. I want to make a new Band-Aid. And, is that a good idea? I don't know. It's just,
Yeah.
you just really need the biggest challenge is within us. It's not externally, it's within us.
Yeah.
And just balancing your heart and your head is a
Yeah.
really hard thing. But using your head and using your heart more as passion rather than as a judgmental thing
More as fuel
is
than the,
super.
yeah.
Yeah, judgment is not a valuable thing.
Mm.
Be logical. Be
Be
logical.
logical.
It makes sense. You always have the quantitative part, but the people part's very important. The smartest thing is to, what did you learn when you failed? And
Mm.
if you've never failed, then you're not going to be a good entrepreneur because you've never taken a risk for sure. And
Yeah.
you always learn more from your failures. So many times when we achieve, it's to get the A or the trophy or the pat on the back. It's not to say, oh my God, I sat here and I coded 8 lines for me, and then
Yeah.
I could do this. It's just understanding that you have it within you and you just need to be open to being very coachable too and
Mm.
listening to people, but being logical. Does this make sense? And if it makes sense, do I have the passion and the commitment and the tenacity to see it through?
Yeah. Well, and would you say these entrepreneurs that come to you with startup ideas, are they mostly younger kids? Are they older? Are they
So
younger
in
adults?
the venture world is incredibly different than especially the firm that I work for now,
Mm.
because we invest in highly technical businesses. Our investment team are almost all PhDs in fields like structural biology, computational biology,
Yeah.
genetics, neuroscience. So that's a very different entrepreneur. They
Yeah.
come with us with new discoveries and new ideas. In the angel world, it really was all across the board. It was everything from high
Right.
school students to 60-year-olds who were, had spent 30 years working for a company, but they always had this burning idea that they wanted to make a better popcorn popper. I mean, so it was really all over the board, consumer. Um, and, the dollar amounts are much lower. I mean, our firm invested from 25,000 to $250,000 as angels. The venture firm invests from 5 million to 40 million.
Right.
So very different, but and again, solving problems, getting product market fit, scaling, building teams, doing sales, marketing, messaging, strategy, same thing.
Yeah. There's a lot of similarities between the two.
You
Would you
are.
say one group was more open-minded or better to work with on something than another?
So I have enjoyed actually being a venture capitalist more simply because we have the resources to stay with our companies. So
Mhm.
from the day we make the investment, we are helping them hire. We are helping them do PR. We are helping them meet new customers. We're helping them form strategic relationships. In the angel world, you don't have that kind of money because we're all
Right.
volunteers as angels, basically.
Oh,
It's
okay.
just we write our own money, our
Right.
own checks. So, a company may raise $1 million. You may only have $50,000 in there and
Right.
you can help, but you have to make money at some point.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
the venture model, the way the compensation for venture works, doesn't work well with the angel community. So it
Right.
really is a volunteer community. And angels generally tend to have bias. They want to make money, but they have bias toward their own community. They want to see companies in their own community thrive. And we definitely, our company in venture is East Coast, West Coast. I mean, we have a couple of
Mm.
Montana investments, but that's very different.
Yeah. Yeah, that would be very different. So you said you enjoy getting to see the company grow more. The people, I mean, is it harder to work with scientists than maybe a high schooler with an idea, or are they more headstrong, so you kind of want to stay away from that? What were your experiences working with the different types of
I
people?
am not a scientist, and I'm one of the few non-scientists on our team.
Mm,
I would not say they're harder to work for. I would say they're more intimidating,
interesting.
because I tend to be the let me sell you some dust. Why don't you give me some money so we can invest it in risky things? Or, you know, let's try this. And the science person is very data, very specific. They've spent a
Yes.
lot of time in labs, they're very technical. So it's just a different animal. But the scientist needs the storyteller.
Mm-hmm.
The person who's selling needs someone to make sure that their product gets sold. So you've got to have a very diverse group to have a really
Yes.
successful team.
Yeah. Yeah. And those scientists, if they're more data and analytical, are they less risky in general, or are they more like do what you need to do to get it to go?
Um, I think scientists define risk differently. I
Hmm.
just do that. They're much more focused on the efficacy of their product because they know if they can cure cancer or if they find a new way to detect, Alzheimer's or whatever, that's a huge market. They already know that. And biology is really hard. The human body is the most complex thing in the universe. I mean, millions of cells, hormones, immune system, everything changing all the time. It's hard. It's very
Yeah.
hard.
Yeah. Well, it's great that they have a place to go to get the people person and the storyteller
Yeah.
uh, to go in front of and back up their scientific discoveries. So while we wrap up here, I have one last question. What are your thoughts for the future for women in technology? What do you see in the venture capital field?
Um, I see a, we're at a hugely changing time. I
Mm-hmm.
love the space I'm in because women are as many men as women go to medical school now. They're getting PhDs, which in science, is a highly disciplined field.
Yeah.
Money rooms are still predominantly men, but what I see happening is I've watched from having zero, CEOs of Fortune 500 companies. Now we're at about 30%. So as women get that experience, as they build their own wealth, they will turn around and invest in their own people, not because they're women, but because we have different. We're building a different culture. We're
Yeah.
we're I love the whole movement of business for good. Our firm never invests in anything that everybody in the firm doesn't think will make the world a better place. So there are lots of people who invest just for the bottom line. That is definitely not us, nor do I think business should do that. And I think that, we have a long way to go, but a lot of doors are being opened. I mean, look at
Yeah.
me. At my age, I'm a
Yeah.
grandmother.
Exactly.
I am
Hmm.
working for a top tier VC firm in the community I love, and that's my dream come true. And if it can happen to me, it'll happen to others. I'm seeing more and more women just start their own firms, focus on their own wealth. And I would encourage every young woman not to focus on the deficits, but to be like water and flow toward the opportunities. And
Yes.
whether those opportunities are with men or women, it's about alignment. And
Hmm.
this is my theory. We need brilliant problem solvers of every gender, in every zip code. We have plenty of problems to solve. And you don't need to get the opportunity to solve that problem just because you live in San Francisco or New York. So I make that assumption every day when I get up. And that's why I've been so passionate about democratizing capital. Not that you have to be less, but just helping people understand there is always money for great ideas and teams that can execute on them.
Yeah.
It's there. There's no doubt.
Well, thank you for joining us.
It's
This is
just
really
my pleasure.
interesting.
Thanks for
Honored
asking
to
me.
have you. Yeah, of course. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to this episode. Next week on Co-Girls on Air.
I would say most of my career, I would be the only woman in the room. Maybe one other woman, and that might have been an administrative person, not someone that was a peer of mine. So 9 out of 10 times, whether it was on a project team or in a meeting in my division,
Right.
I was the only woman. And that's hard.